commercial spaces are going to want as much visibility to their storefronts as possible. There's also an opportunity to potentially incorporate some secondary buffers. Since the residential areas are going to be set back further from the road, they might not be as visible, but you've got the potential for a secondary buffer in there as well. So that's just kind of an idea of how screening and buffering might be able to be used in those areas. So kind of from the ground view, here's some examples of what these might look like in practice. So we've got the Tioga Town Center, again, it's a good example of something that's set back a little bit further from the road. You've got some landscape buffering. I've also got an example of the Villages, which has a pretty dense buffering of some palms and trees and shrubs, so they're utilizing landscape. Another example of some ways that you might utilize screening are at Oakmont. They have used some of their frontage to create some berms, as well as utilizing landscaping, and also some potentially walls, fences, or a fence with a column like on the bottom right. So one of the things that we also wanted to talk about is kind of service areas and site access and how those are addressed in the code. So one of the examples that we put together is there's this gas station on Archer Road and 34th Street, which I'm sure a lot of you are probably familiar with. So this is a really good example of a continuous curb cut. We've got the continuous curb cut on Archer Road, and we've got continuous curb cuts on 34th Street. So there's really not a whole lot of safe areas for pedestrians to be crossing within that area. There's a lot of conflict areas. Another example of kind of an access point off of a secondary road instead of off of a major road and having one curb cut is this gate station off of 13th. And so you can see that the gate, even though it's a gas station, the building has been kind of pulled up further, closer to the road. The fueling station is in the back, so it's screened by the primary building, and you have one access off of the secondary roadway as opposed to having multiple points of access along primary and secondary. So those are some examples of some ways that you can utilize code to stop having those continuous curb cuts. Another example is having multiple building frontages. So, for example, this is the Wawa on 13th Street and 23rd in Gainesville. And you can see that the building actually has kind of not just one main front of the building, but it's actually got kind of three different frontages of the building, so that whenever you look at it, you know, aside from one of the roadways, you're not just looking at a blank back of house. It's got interest on all sides, and it's welcoming you in. There's another good example of that on 23rd and 43rd. You can see the CVS at the corner of 23rd and 43rd. They've got a main pedestrian entrance, and then they've also got a main entrance off of the 43rd Street frontage. So having double or triple building frontages could be something that we looked at. Something else that we might want to look at is how the loading docks and dumpster areas are being handled. So this is an example in the city of Alachua, just up the road on 441. You've got your Family Dollar, but then as you're coming in, your first thing that you see is the dumpster area. So it's not hidden behind the building or screened in any way. This is another example off of 2nd Avenue where you've just got kind of a loose dumpster hanging out, and it's very back of house and not very visually pleasing. This is one at Butler Plaza where they've kind of, they've screened it with landscape. You've got the back of the building has interest. It's not just a flat face. And then another good example at Celebration Point where you have, it's almost difficult to even see kind of what the dumpster, where the dumpster even is, because it's incorporated so well into the building. So those are some examples of what we could look at there. And then signage. So there's ways that, we can either, that we can set forth in code that restrict height or restrict the distance from the roadway, so setbacks. There's also ways we can look at having certain materials that fit with the character of the historic city of Newberry. So there's lots of different ways that we can look at signage and how that can more accurately reflect the city of Newberry's historic character. And I'm going to hand it over to Ryan Thompson. He's going to talk about implementation.
Ryan, before you get into it, ladies and gentlemen, if you're watching at home, we had some audio issues, so you might have missed the first 20 minutes. We're not going to go back over that 20 minutes, but if you were able to watch it visually, and what we were basically doing was looking at different images of different looks and feels that can be created with zoning packages. So if you were able to watch us but not hear us, you just all you really missed was some verbal explanation of what was being created by those packages. And we have the audio fixed at this point, and so we're ready to go. Ryan, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've introduced several development and design elements such as the architectural design, the building orientation, site access, the service, kind of what I term as the ugly side of the building, how do you treat that, and then also screening. In a few minutes, we'll open up the floor to hear from everybody here, which is really the point of this meeting, and we're just trying to jog some ideas. But how is that implemented into your code and then translated into the development that you see along these corridors? We'll take your feedback and we'll recommend amendments to your land development regulations. One of the primary things that I think from the very first step of your application process is a pre-application meeting. It really works both ways. It ensures both the applicant is aware of the overlay and the rest of your land development regulations, and it also allows the applicant to communicate with your staff and allows staff to really understand what their vision is and what they are looking to do, and to find that middle ground, that common ground. It reduces a chance for insufficient applications and actually expedites the review process because the application is enhanced and could also improve opportunities for the project to be approved. With application requirements, renderings and facades really give the reviewer, your staff, the opportunity to look at the architectural style, and even the massing and the size of the building and those kind of details. The landscape plans, similarly, you are able to see what kind of landscape buffers and how those buildings are going to be screened, and the other components of the site, like the parking and the service areas, will be screened. And then looking at signage plans, so ensuring the scale of those signs are appropriate, that the architectural style is compatible with that development. So we're really trying to give staff as much information as possible to be able to make those calls to ensure that it's compatible with the land development regulations. And then looking at the staff review, is it clear? Is it clearly communicated to the applicant of what's required? Is it consistent? Are there any, is it consistent throughout the code? There's not codes that are competing with each other. And is it enforceable? Are we asking in the code for something that an applicant's able to achieve? And that staff, and a standard that staff can hold an applicant to. And then does it uphold your community's character? Certainly there's tremendous character in the city of Newberry, and that's why we're here. We want to preserve that character. And is it ensure the quality land development, both in form and function? And does it encourage master planning? We looked at site access. One of those is joint driveways to minimize the number of driveways on State Road 26 and US 41, and then also interconnecting those developments, making those developments broader than an individual building, so that they work together, so you don't have to get out on 26 to get to the development next door. So with that, I'll invite Mr. Jerry Diedenbach back up to wrap it up and open up the floor to public comment.
Thank you, Ryan.
Okay, so put that little guy there, take this stance here, and we're good. All right, so we're going to do this in a rather fast fashion, and we're going to try to make sure that we are done with this process by June, because we know that there are people who are eager to move forward with their planning and development efforts in the city. We're going to follow this schedule where we will inclusively seek comment and collaboration. Hopefully we can be in the community building next door when it is done and have a little bit more room to move around. And, okay, I'm not doing anything different.
You're too tall.
Yeah,
This works, I'm gonna laugh at you.
yeah. Oh, see?
Laugh at you now.
See, it wasn't,
safe.
it wasn't me.
You're
So,
safe.
oh, there we go, there you go.
Did you do it or did he?
No, you just,
You did, that's
he
what I
did it.
thought. So she's gonna work
she's
on
gonna
it.
get some new batteries.
I'm gonna get some new batteries.
Okay, so a question that we also want to ask tonight is, are we getting enough engagement? Are there other people that should be brought to the table? Should we notify the business owners along the Newberry Road corridor in the downtown and on the entry corridors, you know, both 26 as well as 2741, State Road 45 north-south? And a thought that I had when putting this slide together was, should we do any sort of field visits? It's great to be able to kind of go out and look at some things. In the repetition of both Lori and Kaylee's slides, it wasn't a Clint Eastwood moment, but it was kind of like the good, the bad, and the ugly. Everybody needs a dumpster. Nobody needs to see it when it's the first thing you turn into a subdivision or into a commercial development. And that example that we showed you up in Alachua, when you turn in there, that's the first thing you see. Your car's focused at the dumpsters in the back of house. So we want to take a look at that because we want to create a quality sense of place. And then, Janine, can you put that video up there, please? Full screen it, maybe?
We play?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Maybe if you just hit the space bar. Oh, it's at the very end. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, take the scrubber all the way back. Okay, it's running. So, as we wish we could travel this fast, this is Newberry looking from, 10,000 feet in the air. As we look at the forms that have been created, we see subdivisions on the south that have a nice form, a gridded type network, and then on the east side we see a more organic form. But what we can see is that there is attention paid to detail in the design so that there is distance from the neighborhood to the street. If we swing to the north side of the community, you can see the subdivision Newtown 1894, which is on the right hand side, backs up to the railroad, and a new subdivision has been built right in front of that, right out on the corridor. If you fly to the west side of town, it's a tree-lined street, more traditional. And then backing up here to this view, this is very similar to the view that Kaylee had in her slide. I kind of look at like this as a blank canvas. We have a very wide roadway corridor with land on either side, and this is our opportunity. This is our canvas here that when we look at this, we can take the elements that Kaylee and Lori talked about and think about how we want the look and the feel to actually be coming into the community. So with that, Janine, if you can put the PowerPoint back up, please. I would cheat. I would just do Alt-Tab. There we go. Okay, cool. So I'm going to back up here just a little bit, because when we originally started to create the presentation for tonight and we were talking to staff, this was a very easy view to produce because we have a couple of large-scale projects that are sitting on that area that I called the open canvas. There's tremendous visibility from Newberry Road, but when we look at what happens, when we start our design processes on projects, we try to make sure that we're creating a sense of place on there. So I think these slides here are really helpful for understanding, you know, the land will somewhat dictate what happens. Stormwater is hopefully going to go to the lowest spot on the site. Commercial businesses would want to locate on the corridor, but we want to ensure that what occurs from the visual perspective of the motorist or the resident or the business owner is really something that brings that distinction of, I'm in Newberry and this is the place that I want to be. And so that when you build into the land, okay, and move off of the corridor, a key question that we have is we don't want to just have some, and I know this won't shine on the screen, but if you look at the corridor, I guess it does a little bit, you know, is it important 100 feet back or 200 feet back or 300 feet back that we have that same sense of design and character created there? So that when we think about creating buffers and creating the way that the built environment looks here, how far do we take that in so that it makes it really have a lot of continuity in overall design? And then once inside a designed area, what happens there that reflects the condition or the character that brought you there in the first place? So these were pretty good examples because it gives the idea of a blank canvas and something that we can all kind of talk to. Whoops, there. So, Mr. Mayor, if you are going to moderate or help facilitate, I know that I have at least a Kaylee, a Lori, a Ryan, and a Beth, and pens ready so that we can actually start a little dialogue here.
Okay, and what would be the most efficient way to do this dialogue? Do we have categories that you want us to give feedback on first? Setbacks, green space? Do you want to throw out the categories and then we'll focus on that, then we move to the next category? Is that?
I think, yes.
I want to make sure we stay on, because I know we've got a lot of people here who are here to speak to the USA. Mm-hmm. What we're talking about in the overlay district is when things do come here, what do we want them to look like? How do we want it to feel? So when we get to public comment, if we can, we're going to start with the dais. But this conversation is, what's that feel? What is that space? What is that that ambiance? You know, what is the character of Newberry when things are built here? So you tell me.
All right.
Categories first?
Absolutely. Let's do categories first. And just like in the Google animation there, let's start at the top with the vernacular of the community. Do we always have to have something that represents a North Florida historic sort of, you know, I'm going to say rural vernacular, or having something that is accentuated and maybe a little bit more architecturally progressive, like a Tioga or an Arbor Greens or a Celebration Point? Are those elements potential components in the right place and in the right volume?
Okay, so focusing on vernacular, thoughts, dais first.
Mr. Mayor?
Come on now.
And I think it should be context sensitive. Obviously, the city of Newberry has a core downtown, and that may be treated differently. than, say, outside of the core where, we're from 202 to, to the core, may be treated differently than the core area that has the historic buildings. The city has a historic district, and so maybe that is treated differently than the areas outside of that.
Yeah,
So
the
just
vernacular
wanted-
may change as you get to the historic core and along the edges.
Sure.
It may function as a welcoming gateway.
What would you call the vernacular of the town center? What, is there a name to that style?
For clarity, when you say the town center, do you mean the
Town square, no, not the town center, the town
The
center.
core
Stonehouse, no, Newberry Town Center, it's where Stonehouse Steakhouse is, because it matters, Jim. You obviously didn't come to our
Countryway,
Christmas.
Yeah.
Didn't come to the Christmas festival, Jerry, that's
No.
next year.
What would I call the vernacular of that?
Yes.
I don't know. I'd like to ask the guy who built it, what he calls the vernacular of that.
Is there a name? Maybe we should ask his wife. Okay, all right.
There are, Mr. Mayor, there are elements of the Florida vernacular in that town square.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I would call it active, civic, open space. Yeah.
Okay, thoughts, one vernacular for the whole corridors, a vernacular that changes as you get closer to the historic center. Thoughts on vernacular? We actually do dictate vernacular in our historic district already. So this isn't something that's completely alien to us. If you want to hear from the public first, because we don't have, then we can open up the mic. I think what I'd like to do is do this categorically, dais, public, dais, but let's have one conversation with everybody first. I know no one likes to reach for the mic first.
I tried to throw it at Tripp.
I really like Commissioner Farms without a finger, or no? I do. I think that the active lifestyle, outdoorsy, when I'm in the town center, I feel like that has a modern / rural feel to it, right? It feels very much what I would like to reproduce.
It's inviting.
It's inviting.
It makes you want to go there because there's activity. Yeah.
You want to?
I'll just say,
Commissioner Clark.
I'll definitely agree, and whatever Tripp came up with that, that's kind of what we need to follow. I like that. I mean, the stone, the brick, he's got different sets, so for me, it's just really, whatever the builder's bringing to the table, we're just gonna have to look at, but, right there's a standard to be set, right there.
Natural earth elements.
Natural, yes.
Yeah, stone, brick,
Even our
wood.
downtown has our municipal buildings. This building, we have lime rock. That's where we are in this community. But as far as, the building materials, if you're gonna have a metal building, it needs to have a facade of porches, brick, stain, whatever they do. But like I said, Tripp set the standard.
I mean, for me, I see our historic downtown as an area that can be a standalone different, right? So I know we've got the rock over here, the municipal building. We did a really nice job tying that in. I know we have a lot of red brick downtown. I think that looks nice, but I don't, in my mind, I don't see the goal here as making all of the corridors look like downtown. I think that there can be a step in, but I think we need to think about, I actually really like that idea of a step in so that there's some tie, so that it's not like you're leaving one really distinctive area and hard transition somewhere else, something that looks aesthetically pleasing, as we're being pulled in.
And an element that can help reinforce that is continuity and signage. Once you hit the gateway, and if there were gateway signs at the north and south entrances, the east and west entrances, and they had that element tie-in, you would know that there are certain elements that are continuous throughout the area, but the architectural forms of the buildings themselves may be a little bit different, but you still have, I'm in that city. Yeah.
Commissioner Martin?
Jerry, I really struggle in these processes of telling a property owner what to do with their property. Help me understand a little bit of what just kind of the developmental industry at large has become accustomed to kind of being told what to do by city governments and that sort of thing. And are there elements that they have kind of learned along the way that just have kind of been incorporated because they actually do make sense, or vice versa? Just kind of help me with that.
Absolutely. That's a really good question, and I can give you a really good answer to that. So let me get out of this picture here and talk to you specifically about this. Gas stations. I've done 4 Wawa gas stations right now. Wawa wanted very strongly to be in Gainesville. They really wanted to penetrate into the Alachua County market, and Gainesville has probably the most rigid urban design standards of any of the communities in north central Florida. And the reason that the design standards were in place, and what Kaylee didn't say up here, and that's fine, is we all have probably sat on Archer Road at some time and seen somebody cut through and use that property as the shortcut because they don't want to be sitting in what I call the bean collector of cars here, and they use that as a cut through. So when those designs like that were predicated, and the next example here, that's the bad, that's the better, okay? That's the gate. When a merchant wants to be someplace, they will pretty much do whatever. It's been true for McDonald's, it's been true for Burger King, it's been true for certainly the Wawas. If you think of the Burger King at the corner of 62nd and Newberry Road by the Oaks Mall, they put a giant fiberglass burger on the corner of the building, okay? We were told the reason they did that, that's the birthplace of the Whopper, and they wanted to have that iconic feel there. Most tenants, most builders, if the style is not so lavish that it precludes their ability to conduct commerce, are willing to do that, a little bit of aesthetic or architectural detail. The way that it was addressed here, you all remember this used to be a big metal building for Rhodes furniture, then rooms to go, and Wawa wanted that corner. We did some things that were pretty innovative in the sense that we always want to make sure that our codes aren't prohibitive to somebody doing their business model. Now, at certain times of the day, the cashiers here don't want somebody to come in from 13th Street, come in from 23rd Avenue, then come in from the gas pumps and rob them in the middle of the night. And so we always want to make sure that there are things in there for alternative compliance. If you are trying to reach an aesthetic standard or a character standard, if somebody comes to you all and says, I can do this, but my business model is still selling gasoline 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, rain, shine, hurricane or not, this is what I need to do. You need to let them do that. You need to have that private property right effectively conveyed so that the business is not restricted from commerce. I'm really strong about that. And so in the Gainesville Code, it said you have to have so much building frontage along there or architectural elements. So you see this big trellis that I'm pointing to on the left television screen here is we built a trellis out there that goes all the way out to the canopy so that visually ties together, and that was enough. Also, and it's you can't see it here, sorry, but there is a fence along the 23rd Avenue side because we didn't want people just wandering back and forth and panhandling at the pumps or not having that sense of, I just got off the shift, it's 11 o'clock at night, I may be not the most comfortable person, but I still need gas. We didn't want people to feel uncomfortable in the environment. So if someone can adequately demonstrate, Commissioner Martin, that they are reaching alternative compliance and they are substantively creating the look, they get a pass. They get to do it. We created a fence detail along 23rd, and if you look at it next time you go there, or if you look at the wing of the canopy, the form in it is a repetitive W, which is part of the branding for Wawa. It's the W. People can be creative, and they did that for Gainesville. You know, we asked, or the plan board effectively there asked, and we came up with the way. We scratched our heads and like, hey, what if we do this, or what if we bring the canopy out? So, yeah, never prohibit commerce, never usurp the private property rights of somebody to actually make a site work, but allow them to bring their creativity to you, and you generally will get good results. Absolutely.
So I just wanted to add something too, because I think to me, one of the things that I've always seen and noticed is, I think businesses also really appreciate a community that has a sense of community. And I think one of the things that I've always felt like makes a difference too is, you know, a community can have really high standards, but can still be really supportive of businesses. And I don't think that those things have to conflict. You know, we work in a lot of municipalities that might have really strong code requirements, and they're difficult to deal with. And so when you put those together, that's not very supportive of businesses. But we also work in a lot of communities that really have a sense of community, and they've created a code that really supports that sense of community, but they really support businesses through the process. I mean, not only, like Jerry said, of having maybe ways to kind of specially accommodate a specific business need or something like that, but also just in how staff helps them through the process, how you set up a process that's very easy to follow, how you're creating guidelines that, like I said, really support your community, but also you're doing it in a way that you're helping people through the process. So it doesn't necessarily have to restrict, in my mind, business.
Yeah, and I've never known Brian or any of the staff, you know, preceding Brian at Lowell, they don't have the attitude or the mindset that I got a badge and I'm a regulator. They have the heartfelt commitment that they are facilitators of your vision. So that's part of the difference too.
I want to interject one thing here, because I've had an awful lot of conversations with residents on something similar here, and on a similar theme. And what we are talking about right now at this stage is an overlay district that runs up and down our main corridors, which is what we all traverse. It's what gives us that sense of community and gives us a feel. And I've had a lot of conversation with people who think that we are creating an overlay district that's going to blanket the entire town. And that's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is, as in our gateway, up and down those main corridors, we want to set the standard so that when you come in and you build a really nice development, someone doesn't come in right next to you and build a not so nice development. And you know, once it happens, and then it's there. So now is our chance at this moment in our history to sort of set this vision and feel to take into the future. But this is not a conversation about putting the overlay district over the entire city and raising the standards everywhere. Newberry will still be known as an affordable housing community. We will still have plenty of areas of our town where that kind of development can happen. We're talking about a narrow view up and down those main corridors. You know, I liken it, once you set the standard, everyone has the choice. I can buy property on Newberry Road and build to that standard, or I can buy property in the southwestern quadrant and I can build to Newberry's already existing standards.
Right.
And everybody goes in with their eyes open, knowing what's going to happen.
Yeah. And I put that map up that shows where the orange lines are that cover that gateway. Yeah. I think an example, and I can't remember who jumped to the table first, whether it was Mr. New or Brian, it's like, we don't want to be US 19 in Tarpon Springs, where you don't know where it starts or where it ends.
And that has been
Yeah.
our primary goal. Now, I want to keep us on task, because
Yeah.
we're supposed to be talking about vernacular, not philosophy just
Yeah.
yet.
Yeah.
Open to the public. Any public views on vernacular feel, look, what you vision, what you see? Mr. Boyer, introduce yourself to the crowd.
Walt Boyer, Newberry citizen. What I'd like to see is, I mean, there's a lot of people I've talked to, and I'm sure all of y'all have heard, you know, they're afraid to lose that small town feel that Newberry embraces. And we all know growth is inevitable. So what I'd like to see is, you know, along that eastern gateway coming in, I mean, if we can have some kind of, I mean, I'm not an architect, but I mean, if we can have design elements, you know, in the frontage, you know, along that corridor, you know, that reflect small town Newberry or small town USA, it'll bring a comfort to a lot of people, you know, instead of bringing in modern buildings, you know, or having something like the Stephen Began building, you know. I mean, those definitely things that wouldn't fit. But just incorporating that small town USA, not necessarily what we've got here in downtown, but, just those things that keep small town USA alive, like Tripp has done over at the town square. That's just kind of the theme that I would like to see coming into town.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead, sir.
I'm Larry Turner, also a citizen here. We need to think, you're starting at 202 as the first position.
Now, we're commenting on vernacular appeal, right?
I'm understanding. We need to think of that as the first side of Newberry these people see coming into town. And I would like to keep it warm, welcoming, and hopefully, somewhere in the long run, we won't wind up being urban sprawl from Gainesville. That was part of what that area was hoped to do anyway a long time ago. And I'm still of the opinion, I hope we don't incorporate some of that stuff over here. Keep it rural, keep it urban, keep it friendly, family oriented. I could care less about a college degree. It don't matter to me. I want it friendly.
All right, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Mr. Norfleet, I saw you were going to get up and speak to the vernacular.
Come on, you've been mentioned a couple times, so.
Oh, he's looking at his face. We got notes.
Yeah, man, I'm ready. Yeah, one of the things, like y'all were saying about your signs and stuff, one thing I'd like, be careful about writing the rules. How tall something can be, how big it could be. You kind of limit the design, you know what I mean? And, there's different ways to do these signs. We did the water tower out there at the square to try to give it that thing. And sometimes, it puts Brian in a bad spot because they don't match the exact deal. And, it's going to be hard to write the rules just exactly right. I think you're going to a certain degree have to be able to trust your commission to have enough common sense to say, because not everything, and you asked what that town square, when we did the town square, our architect, I kind of wanted to do a little newer version of Old Newberry. We used the brick and the different stuff so it'd look a little bit different. And something I think the city could do to make Newberry look 100% better to me are the signs coming in Newberry. We put a little bit of money in some nice signs with some solar lighting that look good. I'm a big deal when I go to these cities and drive in, and no offense, but I think ours pretty much at the bottom. You know what I mean? But you talk about some stone and a country look that says welcome to the city of Newberry. I mean, it would go a long way. And we're always worried about the sprawl. And like you said, growth's coming all over Florida, and we're having a mass exodus up north. But one of the things that I think on our growth we got to look at, and I was talking to a guy today, and he was talking about Alachua and a couple of different places, and I think we're seeing a different dynamic as far as what we're seeing. I know we got a subdivision between here and High Springs. It's actually in Gilchrist County. We've probably sold about 35 lots in there, and probably it's representing about 10 states that I know of off the top of my head, everywhere from Alaska to Washington to everywhere else. And these people are all bringing those jobs with them. And so they're not commuting back to Gainesville, they're working from home because their whole big deal was the fiber internet. And it's kind of making these towns, these smaller towns, I think they're ready for it, like you said, not a bedroom community. And I've said for years, you can say what you want to, Newberry's a bedroom community, but I think with this new dynamic coming in, you could see it not be as much. We're always going to have the effect of Gainesville, but I think some of your stuff is, y'all got some good ideas, but just be careful. I like Lowell Garrett a lot, but some of the rules, he wrote some of the regulations so tough, it was hard for anybody even to understand them. You know what I mean? It left a lot to interpretation. So, it's easy to write them all up and we're in a vacuum, and then 10 years later, it's kind of different. You know what I mean? And it kind of puts everybody in a spot. But it's tough being in y'all's spot, trying to decide, what goes what and where and how, and it's kind of like Tim said, back to your property rights. I'm kind of like you. I want it to look good, but my looking good and Mark's looking good may be two different things. You know, and it's kind of like when we do on the subdivision, we put the the homeowner association, and it's such a fine line of being a yard Nazi and yet not letting, you know, Jordan's property value goes down because I come in there, you know, because me and Jordan both wanted our yard to look good. Well, he could follow through, but mine look like crap. You know what I mean? So it's a fine line.
I'm glad I got the nice yard in there.
And you know, and that's where the city is with the developments and different things, and it's real hard to it's kind of a tough spot to be in, you know what I mean? But I do think one of the easy things, like I said, the signs and the different thing, and I agree with your landscaping, but
We're gonna get a landscaping here in a minute.
yeah, but like you said, but one of the things is just be careful not write the rules so tight that there's no freedom to maybe, you know, different ideal that you can't do it.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate it. Anybody else who wants to speak to vernacular look? Vernacular look? What would our next broad category be? Jerry, want landscape? I'm interested in the landscaping because Commissioner Martin on vernacular.
Yeah, just a couple of bullet point things that I wrote down were the natural earth elements, the brick. That split face rock can kind of look a little bit like lime rock. So I was okay with that. Hardy board. Mr. Turner brought up the warm, softer kind of tones is what rung in my head when he was talking. And then, of course, if you can find the lime rock and you want to use that, I don't see really any harm in that stuff. The super modern, I don't think appeals to really a lot of people out this way. Or that, just the modern art, the super polished metal, that kind of stuff. We don't have any of that. It would definitely stick out like a sore thumb. So those are a couple of things I wrote down.
Good, good.
Thank you. Landscaping?
Well, let's hit that third bullet under that built environment and design because it's part of the vernacular. Building placement and orientation. In the examples that Kaylee showed, you know, we've worked on, you know, both of those project groups in there. But if you think about 1980 Butler Plaza, big box, huge parking field, and then State Road 24 Archer Road. Over time, and as we've started to, starting in 2012, and we started to work with the expansion of taking over the entirety of that 267 acres, there was a paradigm shift. Ms. Butler and the tenant said, I want to be out on the street and I want to create a different thing. So actually, in brief, Butler has 4 zones in it. There's a town center where like the P.F. Chang's is and the Whole Foods and stuff like that. And that is evolving into this little walkable space where it's park once, shop a bunch. But then there's also the space where I'm here for 477 diapers and a television set and a washing machine, so I'm in a Best Buy or I'm in a Target sort of thing. So there's a place for both. So when we talk about building placement and orientation, I know that, you know, a good example, you all have been up and down Tower Road. Right across from Oak Hall School, there was a 157-acre piece of property that extended from Tower Road, your perspective, all the way east to 24th Avenue, just south of the bridge. And that property there has got a combination of single-family detached homes, apartment complex that's recently been built, commercial, medical, and retail on the west side, and there's a piece on the east side to actually catch people at the neighborhood. Hasn't been developed yet, but there's a little community convenience land use there. The point of that example is when we're looking at building placement on Tower Road, those buildings are really visible, and what you don't see is a huge parking field. You look in and you go, gosh, I'd like to go in there, and there may be some corporate headquarters, or I see some people working out at a gymnasium and flipping tires there, or, oh, there's North Florida Medical Center right there on the corner, so they have that attraction. So I'd like to talk a little bit about building placement. Where is it appropriate, and what do you all want to see on the way in? Do you want buildings pulled up to the State Road corridor to establish that feeling, or if somebody is bringing a large-scale tenant, what I would call an anchor, like a grocer or a large retail, is it okay for that to have more visibility from the corridor? Because that will happen over the next 10 years.
Commissioner Martin?
I think that one thing that would appeal to me personally, but I don't know if other people share that, is almost a tunneling effect where you're sitting back off of the
Good point.
road further out, but as you get closer in, maybe it gets a little.
So the scale decreases as the speed decreases. When you're out there in the 65-mile-an-hour section, you may have a little bit bigger feel and a bigger perspective, but when you get around the curve at like Doc Corrales, it starts to come into where I'm in the town. Is that what you're saying?
Sort of,
Yeah.
yes. I think psychologically and aesthetically, when we've been up here and talked about traffic calming and those sort of things, you know, if it's somebody that's working in Gainesville and they're coming over here, you know, I don't know if it's possible to kind of give them a wind down.
Yeah.
As they're coming through. I remember when I used to work at Nationwide and I lived in Newberry Oaks, it was hell until I got to Jonesville.
Yeah.
And then between Jonesville and my house, it was
Decompression time.
Everything goes down. Everything goes down. And I kind of feel as if maybe if it gets choked down, that gets kind of recreated or is at least not lost.
Yeah.
Because it's there now. How do we kind of try to preserve that as much as we can with trying to find this balance? I'm very cognizant, just in the last 10 years that I've been sitting here, or 9 years that I've been sitting here, that to a certain extent, I feel like we've kind of become a victim of our own creation. And that attracts a lot of people. That doesn't appeal to people that have been here for a long time. And obviously growing pains are better than shrinking pains, Jerry. But when we sit up here and we talk about smart growth and, you know, I just want to be more active in it being just more than kind of a slogan. And I think that's hopefully what we're all doing here tonight.
I think you hit it right on the head. I mean, that feeling, because we all travel the state road corridors, and when we're looking at, you know, I love this example, and this is the coming home example. When you are coming down the Newberry Road corridor and coming into town, I can say that I've been hurried and come in here and been stopped and told, I got a meeting with the city manager, I got to get here on time. It still cost me a ticket, but...
2 for that.
Yeah. But, you know, at 65 miles an hour, that scale and that aperture, if you will, something has to be bigger to be visible when you're faster or more in contrast with the area. But you also want to have that sort of like, okay, I take my foot off the gas, I'm home. I get it. And in these spaces, what happens along here in these big areas, because what you don't see are, there's not a potential project here yet, or here, or here, or here, but when there is, they need to help with that progression of decompression.
Okay, Commissioner Maison.
So, if I understand it correctly, I kind of like that Tioga feel as you're coming into Newberry, as you get closer downtown, because as you're driving 60 miles an hour, if the commercials are too close to that state road, you'll miss it. But I feel that if the further off it is, you're able to actually see it as you come to it. And then as you come into the city of Newberry, things are a little kind of tight like this right here. To me, the commercials here seem like they're, and it could be that it's just the distance from it, but it seems like the commercials are too close to the road to me. And if I'm driving, I might pass some of it. Or I might be like, oh, whoa, let's turn around, let's U-turn and come back. But if it's farther off like Tioga, I'm able to see it as I'm coming to it. Make sense?
Yeah, very much so.
Okay, other thoughts on building placement from the dais? Commissioner Clark?
I'll just say that I like the feel of when you coming off the state road, you're going into it, and then you're in the slow zones, left, right, just like we're talking about at the Butler Plaza. instead of pulling in and out onto the state road, big parking lots like that, I'm not for that right there look from our state road, so.
Yeah.
I like to turn in, go find what you want, and come back out and go.
Well, and I think, and I guess the reason that I kind of see landscaping and building placement linked, because I think that one of the goals coming out of the visioning statement, visioning process, and this is the end of the visioning process, to Commissioner Martin's point about smart growth, we've spent the last year at this point asking these kinds of questions about how we want to grow and what can we do to be part of how we grow instead of being reactive to how we grow, is that green belt, right? We want that green belt. We want you to know when you've left Jonesville. We want you to drive through green space, see those open fields, see those cows, and we want you to know when you come into Newberry, you're in Newberry. I've had more conversations in the past month with people in Jonesville who believe that they live in Newberry than I ever thought possible. And eventually, it's going to be where people don't even know about Jonesville and Newberry. They just all think Gainesville, right? And I want us to protect that. I want us to know. So when I think of that tunneling effect, I think of the landscaping aspects as well. I like the berms. I like the heavy landscaping, the front that keep that green space. Even when there's a neighborhood right on the other side of that berm, as I drive, I don't even know it's there because there's a whole lot of landscaping. So I think that those two, in my mind anyway, I think those two things are linked. Landscaping, and I think, I would imagine with my conversation with you guys, nobody wants to see a big parking lot right up there. Now, I get what you're saying about a big grocer, right? They kind of need some of that, but I think even the one in the Publix in Jonesville has done a pretty good job of having a
Lining the street.
Lining the street so that you're sort of brought into it in a nice, friendly way, to Larry's point.
Well, another great urban example to complement what you're saying there, Mr. Mayor, you think about 23rd Avenue and 43rd Street, the Millhopper area. You got Publix there, you got Fresh Market across the street, and when I moved to Gainesville, there was nothing in there in the front. There was road, and then there was store and parking. But if you look how those areas have transitioned or matured over time, when Publix rebuilt, it got more landscaping. So you still know it's there. It's the anchor. But on the other side, when Fresh Market came in and took over, remember the old cash and carry? Okay? Now, there's a bank up front, there's a credit union on the corner, and you still see when you turn in there, that's where I'm going. And oh my gosh, look at all those people at the bakery sitting there too. And look at all those people there at, Northwest Seafood coming out with, their food and all. Those become places that are super vibrant. I'm proud to kind of live in that area of the city because I think it's one of the most, holistically functional areas that wasn't done just on one canvas. It kind of evolved that way, so it's a good example to kind of look at, and it makes good sense.
Okay. Before we have any more comment, we're approaching an hour and a half, and we're still on our first agenda item. So I'm going to ask if you like what you're hearing, just go along with it. If you have a different idea, if you want to argue or express a different opinion, not argue, but just express a different opinion, come up. But if you like that tunneling effect, if you like the green space idea, that's what you're hearing. We'll just let that move on. Any other comments on building placements from the dais? Public comments? Anybody want to argue, vote, push for a different concept? If you like that, let's go back to landscaping because I kind of segued there. Did anybody disagree with the way that I'm seeing the landscaping of the burns and the trees and the heavy? If there is a development, it's a good 30 feet back. I put the stormwater in the front with the green and then some landscaping behind it. I don't even know there's a neighborhood behind it. Commissioner Mazon, you have a thought?
No, I think of him when he was talking about, and I think of when they talk about a small town feel. When I come in from Jonesville, I see cows on my left, cows on my right, and I see green fields. That's what I love to see. Hide the developments. I don't want to see no side of the walls. I want to see green fields, and that reminds me of
nobody's backyard backed up to the road.
Backyard. I want to see palm trees. I want to see green, and that'll remind me of coming into Newberry as opposed to going into an extension of a city.
Anybody add to that, Commissioner Martin?
Out of respect for commercial potential, I know when I drive, it's particularly when I'm in place, and I travel all the time, trying to find a commercial spot that's heavily landscaped in the front is such a pain in the butt. And you end up like trying to, almost impeding traffic, but because you're looking and you're starting and stopping, you got kind of this rubberneck thing. So out of respect for commercial, and knowing that they have to have visibility, a thinner look is okay with me. I don't think we need to go.
Could you,
that's almost camouflaged.
No, and when I talk about berms, I'm talking about neighborhood residences. For a point of reference, I think that the landscaping in front of Publix in Jonesville is attractive, still green, and doesn't diminish Publix's visibility. Are you disagreeing with that, or you think that they've hit the right balance?
To me, it's more than I would necessarily command as a city commissioner for them in the future. I think we already know that Publix is there because we already know it's there. If it's brand new, I don't know that I would know that was Publix for a while. I mean, yes, we'd know because it was getting built and all that kind of stuff, but if I'm new or something, or if I am living in Gainesville or living in Tampa and I'm looking for a new place to move to, it's not going to stand out to me as much. And then therein lies some of the attractiveness also of, well, it's easy for me to get around because I kind of know where everything is. I can see it really kind of quick, and I am drawn to this place because I'm not fighting to find out where the grocery store is or the gas station is or any of that stuff. So it's just...
Commissioner Maison, then back to Commissioner Coleman.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, with the Publix, okay, everybody in this room knows that when you see blue, you're gonna think either Lowe's or Walmart, right? Am I wrong? So as you're driving by, you're gonna think it's Lowe's or Walmart. Publix or even some other grocery stores have that certain distinct look about Wawa. To where when you drive, you can be like, that might be a Wawa. You start to slow down, and like Jonesville, you start to recognize that facility, and you'll be like, that's a Publix, that's a Wawa, and it's embedded in your brain. I mean, I could just name like 5 or 6 of them that, as I drive past, I just know them. So I think to a certain point, I agree with you, but I love that green. Green's gonna make Newberry a small town. Remember that.
Commissioner Coleman.
And I'm gonna lead right off of that. I mean, Coleman's, all the cows are gone over here, and they're pretty much off the place there on Newberry Road. Across the road, you got Planet Pines. So if you're gonna look for the small town feel for cows or Planet Pines, it's not gonna be on Newberry Road. We gotta get off of that. And you got, I'm looking at, I know one contractor here that spent a lot of money to build on Newberry Road. As long as there's commercial up there and the way that all y'all are talking, but off the road. But it's, it's inevitable. We can't, Newberry's changing, this is the way it is, but if you're thinking the agricultural side of it, it's gone. On Newberry Road. On Newberry Road. Yeah, no, I can show you cows, but they ain't gonna be there. And they're not gonna be, probably a lot of timber that's, of course, that was, I think, replanted. What is that? This timber's probably what? Right there at 202. What, 5, 10 years old? So, yeah, we're not gonna have that ag look. I'm just trying to make a point. We gotta go with something that would be more, that's cost effective for the contractor. You gotta think about them. And, I mean, because if you say, hey, you're gonna have to be 50, 75 yards off of the highway before you even do anything, well, he's done spent a pile of money on that land that's just gonna sit there, that he's gonna have to landscape, he's gonna have to put a wall up,
He's gonna have to keep it maintained. So we gotta look at that too. It's not just throw out there and say, yeah, you're gonna be 75 yards off the highway, and with that, you gotta landscape it, and sorry, that's the way it is. Can't do that. Gotta think about these things too. So that's why I wish we'd get more input.
Well, and I think for me, I think the Publix in Jonesville and Town of Tioga in Jonesville are good examples of how thick and dense. Because the one thing I like about the Town of Tioga is that they've got their stormwater up front that has some minimal landscaping, but doesn't impede visibility, but does create that illusion of green space. So that way you're working with the developer who already has to have these wastewater, not wastewater, but stormwater as a part of it, but you're utilizing it in a way that is helpful. Any community input on the conversation that you've heard? Again, if you like what you're hearing, just out of the interest of time, just give us a thumbs up. If you say, no, I want to see a parking lot, let us know that. No takers on a parking lot, okay. Jerry, you think you've got enough of this conversation and these categories to bring us back?
I do. I think we did a good job of getting into the idea of screening and buffering. I didn't see, in the interest of time, I didn't see anybody say, gosh, I'd love to look at that dumpster when I turn into that shopping center. So access control and service, everything requires a back of house. If you're bringing in 400 pounds of French fries, it's coming in a semi. If you're delivering tractor parts or if you're delivering medical supplies, there's a back of house. I think that we don't need to have a lot of discussion about that because we can give you some good examples of how that works and how it doesn't work. I do want to touch on this last bullet here in the second grouping of signage, though. I will say this. Your code is pretty good, but I think when Kaylee had examples up here, I'll jump through this super quick. There are really good creative ways to show that you are arriving someplace. I don't want to go too fast here.
That's our last slide.
Yeah. He keeps me on task.
While you're looking for
Yeah.
that, I just want to somebody had mentioned city signs. We've asked our developers to hold up while we finish this process. We've actually held up our own process while we finish this process because we did have in the works big monument brick signs for the city of Newberry, but we want to hear from the community about how they want those to look. So we put that on hold so that whatever we build will be in line with what we're working on in this process.
Yeah. The idea of continuity in design, when Kaylee assembled these examples there, I think it's really neat when people can bring a character element. One of the things that I have constantly fought in my 30 years of doing this is we get to a place and the city will say, oh no, that logo, that counts against you. I think it's a silly thing. I mean, somebody come up with a nice tasteful leaf like that, or in Windsor you see the birds flying, the word there. I don't want to tie people's hands. What you see on the left-hand side, and boy, this one sure is dated. I have to ask Kaylee where we found this. Where was there a video store still in operation? But yeah, when we did the designs at Butler Plaza, because the City of Gainesville's rules state that you cannot advertise a business except on the parcel that the business operates, it eliminates a key component for people in wayfinding. So it's common to use these overall, market signs where you've got multiple tenants on there because everybody knows. They see the Target, oh, there's a Target. They see the blue, they know it's a Walmart. This is an area where I think we want to decide, do we want to eliminate things like pylon signs where you've got a steel pole up there in the air and then you've got the sign on top of it like that. I don't see a lot of that, but I know people that still ask for those sorts of things because that's what the corporation has. Monument signs and things that are placed on the ground that emulate the character of the area because of the split rock or the use of the wood trellising and the materials that may be more intrinsic are a little bit better. I'd like to talk a little bit about how you all feel about advertising.
I'd like to talk about that too, but before we go down this black hole, because every time I talk about signs,
Mr. Walker, get you?
Yeah. Give us your view, your opinion on what Mr. Norfleet said, because, most of y'all know I'm a high school teacher. And if you put a rule, there are students who will spend 3 times the amount of time figuring out how to get around that rule than they would spend if they just followed the rule. And I think that a lot of times, like if he had come and said, well, I want to build that water tower sign, it wouldn't fit in anywhere, but it clearly looks. So how do you keep a fluidity and a flexibility? I think it was Lori that said, a lot of that is the culture of your staff to say, well, here's the rules, but we're here to help you work and figure out, how to make that happen. We're not trying to drive you away. And I think a lot of people, I've had a lot of conversations with people that believe that what we're trying to do here is create standards so rigid and so expensive that everything shuts down and we become like some of our cities around us that seem to be anti-growth. I don't see this process. I see this process as getting into the ground floor of being an active partner with our developers in building a character community. But how do we address that element of keeping flexibility when it comes to signs? Because a decade of signs has told me that there is no way to answer signs. So hopefully you have better experience.
I think it started with, tell me what you think about what Mr. Norfleet said. And I'll give you a quick story to that. 25 years ago, we drove down to the Villages trip, and he said, get your tall self up on top of that car. And I stood on top of a little SUV while my wife and Christy were in the car like, don't fall off there. And we took a picture like this. Back in the old days before the phone would just do it in one fell swoop. But Tripp is exactly right. What the water tower is, it's not a sign to me, it's a landmark icon. And that's a little bit different, I thought where you were going to go was to the point of, well, we can't tie people's hands and we don't want to get into First Amendment issues about signage and depriving people the ability to advertise using their brand. But when Tripp is creating something like that, he's doing that because it's a part of a vision. And if that water tower or the silhouette of that water tower then ends up being in signs or ends up being in elements within the community, that's not a bad idea. That's a great idea because it establishes that place of distinction. It's a distinct area. It's a character enhancer. So it's easier then for Brian to say, you're coming in here and you want to do a 24 square foot plexiglass placard with fluorescent lights behind it that's on from 8 o'clock at night till 12 o'clock. That's where you say that's a dramatically different thing than what Tripp was doing. Because what Tripp is doing is establishing a sense of place and a character about it. So every one of these examples on the right-hand side, I think, that are not the ultra-high monuments with the placards in them, are good examples of we took time to create a design, an ethic, a feel, and a sense of character to reinforce that element. That's my thought on that.
Gary,
Okay.
what is a foxglove?
Oh, residential community? Yeah. 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 Yeah.
No,
Resident-
actually, what is a foxglove?
Oh, it's a plant. No. It's a, our landscape architects, it's a plant. Foxglove?
The sign is not a local sign.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's why you didn't know about it.
Yeah.
Mr. New, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, I wanted to offer a perspective with regards to the question that you asked. I think that well, one, Tripp is absolutely right when he says the beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So I think that in many regards, our code should have enough specifics in there for staff to help a developer comply. I'll give you an example of where lack of specificity hurts you. If your standards say that it should be nicely landscaped, well, some people think that's turf. That's nicely landscaped, and there's no specificity. So in code that I think helps us a little more is we define what we think nicely landscaped is. We need 3 canopy trees, we need, 6 understory brushes every so often. To kind of give some examples, I think we were working on a code the other week where the debate was, should we include an example of what we mean when we specify a rural activity center? And staff's perspective was yes. I think that our code absolutely should have the opportunity for someone that doesn't meet our code to come before the board and appeal. So if someone wants to put the largest neon flashing, Las Vegas casino sign in, and our code lacks the specificity for staff to block it, then it just becomes a lawsuit. If our code blocks it and they go through the appeal process, if staff explains the code, shows them every way to comply with the code, how we could get you there, and we just can't, they go through the appeal process, and this board is elected to maybe perhaps offer an exception to the code because they think it'll work with the community. This large Las Vegas style sign would actually work just great at City Hall next to the historic First Baptist Church, or not. So I think that, I get the impression, and I think you said it best when you said that when staff is commissioned to help you come into compliance with code, and that's really the way we're trying to do it, then we can help people get there. But without specificity, I think we're going to be in an endless dispute about how things should be. I think signs should have a maximum height or maximum square footage area. I don't know what it should be. I'm not trained. The experts can help us with that, and there should be an appeals process if someone wants to do it a little bit differently.
Okay. Commissioner Martin?
Jerry, in today's world, are signs even needed? I mean, you look at a shopping center, for instance, like Tony was saying. I mean, you could see a Walmart sign. You can see a Walmart sign from pretty much anywhere, and so on. That was one question. But another question was, again, with that whole tunneling effect, if you got speeds of 65 mile an hour, the speed limit's 65, so people are going 70.
Mm-hmm.
You need something bigger, further out,
right,
than when you're going
that scale,
30 or 40. Is there ways of writing in? I mean, when you're pointing at these particular signs on the right, one thing that stands out, almost every one of them has 3 elements: a metal, a wood, and a rock. And the other ones also have 3 elements, but they're kind of portrayed a little bit differently. The ones on the left are not really offensive to me, but I do psychologically associate that with a more national brand, commercial size, box brand versus a mom and pop, which is not necessarily that, but that says more of the franchise, mass, national, commercial type stuff.
I think that's good input.
Okay, Commissioner Mazon and then Commissioner Clark.
Totally agree with you. I feel this is that me? You good? Okay. That signage in the city of Newberry, the material should be used from the city of Newberry. That makes Newberry. I mean, you look at these signs up here, they look like the average sign from everywhere. Be the originators. Use the material from Newberry that you have Trip sign, is wood from that tower. I mean, you got, Post Fuel. You have a lot of businesses around here that are local. Use those materials to make these signs, to make them different from everybody else. That way they'll know they're coming into Newberry.
I agree with that. Commissioner Clark?
I was going to say, when people develop, though, they're spending a lot of money here. They're going to bring in something that's nice. And the ones on the right to me are subdivision signs, and the ones on the left are the commercial. So you're not gonna see, these everywhere in this build right here. You're gonna see the ones on the right, like I'm saying, a nice subdivision. That's what you're gonna get, and that's what we probably expect right there coming in. The ones on the left, I think that's gonna be up to the chains or whoever. They're gonna spend the money for these signs. They're not just throwing up something crazy. So I think we have to look at situation dictates, and we need to look at that. But the vernacular, I understand. But there again, we're back to the brick, rock, stone, metal, hardy board, the things that look nice.
Commissioner Martin.
Well, I guess I kept talking, so we didn't really answer the first question about really needing a sign anymore. I mean, for instance, when I lived in Newberry Oaks, I mean, we didn't have a sign for Newberry Oaks off of 26. Sometimes I drive around and I see these housing development signs. They're just, I don't know, they're not attractive because, I mean, I just almost feel like they're unnecessary. I mean, I guess maybe the builders like to do the differentiation, but I don't know that they need to necessarily do it for my benefit, because it.
Can I take a crack at that?
Not really adding value for me necessarily, but.
I think it goes back to the earlier conversation about the landscaping, right? If you've, because when I'm trying to think where the sign is when you go into town of Tioga, but I don't really need a sign on the road because I can see the signs on the buildings, right? Publix, I think, has a low base monument sign. I know I've talked to Tractor Supply, and they have complained very loudly to me that remember, Jonesville is not in the city of Newberry, so it's governed by Alachua County, because they govern how high the signs can be, and they have a little monument sign out, and most people drive by it, they can't see it. So, I think if you're on the road and I can see your business, then I agree with you. I think, we're all following little blue dots these days. If you're off the road and I can't see it, then I think the sign does become important, right? So I think that and I think that Commissioner Clark is making it, because I really do like the signs on the right. I think all those are attractive. They're unique, but those are all residences, right? And I think we're primarily right now focused on commercial development, how we want that to look. And if you're doing residential, we kind of don't want to see you, right? We want the berm and we want it off, those kinds of things. So that was kind of my take on that.
Yeah, and I would agree. And I think, one thing I would point out is I think businesses like the signs. I mean, I do think we're all pretty dependent on our phones to get us where we're going, but I think businesses like being able to have a sign, especially if they are set back from the road. It gives them some of that frontage to the road. Something else to think about how landscaping and signs work together. One of the things, especially in a business area, that we always try to encourage is more canopy trees versus understory trees. I think a lot of times people think it should be the other way, that if you want to see the building, you should plant smaller trees. But really, it's the opposite. The ones that I think are most successful, when you think about like driving up to Tioga, the tree canopy, once the trees are mature, it's high enough that you have that vision window that you can look underneath the tree canopy. Whereas you think about like a crepe myrtle, their mature size is right in your vision, and so that's really blocking what you're trying to see. So if you are set back from the road, if you think about having larger canopy trees that you see under the canopy, you have some shrubs along the ground plane, but you're creating a vision window. But I do think that businesses like to have that sign to be able to have visibility. I'll say too, we design a lot of signs, and in the same municipality that has the same sign code, you can do a lot of things creatively. So I think having that box of, there's a maximum height, maybe there's a maximum signage area, maybe there's some material requirements or something, there's still a lot of room for creativity there, even having some of those restrictions.
Okay. Commissioner Farnsworth, were you trying to get a word in? Okay, let's open it up to the public on the topic of signs. So, and ladies and gentlemen, we've got, we normally, this little light here kind of gives everybody 2 minutes and kind of keeps us moving. It's not working. So I'm trying to, it's coming up on 9 o'clock and we still have the USA. So I'm trying to be respectful of our time. So I'll just give you a signal when we're getting close to that 2 minutes, because it's up there. Go ahead, Miss Peggy. Introduce yourself.
Citizen. A couple things. Mr. Martin mentioned the fact that, I have cousins on the southwestern coast of Florida. They're beautiful, and you can't find a blasted thing because all the signs are so low behind the hedges and the bushes. It's pretty to drive down the street, but if you're looking for Publix, forget it. Also, as far as signs go, if you don't have signs, how do you find the places? I went hunting today in Gainesville, of all places, for some place, and they didn't have one of those multi-units because they had a bunch of companies, but they didn't have one of those signs out there that show what's in there. It took me 15 minutes to find this place, and I had my GPS going. I still couldn't find it. So you have to have signs. They have to be readable. If you're driving 60 miles an hour, can't be, those signs for the houses are really nice, but you don't read those when you're going fast because there's no contrast. That's a sign designer. But you have to be able to read the sign. You have to be able to find the place you're looking for, and you have to have a sign someplace to find those places. So signs are important.
Thank you, ma'am. Other people from the public, other public comments on signage? Brian? We'll count you as public.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think from staff's perspective, what we're looking for from the commission in terms of direction is not a sign standard that's going to limit the creativity. It's a sign standard that's going to limit the basement, the lower end of the sign that's allowable. We do want to be able to say this level, this type of signage is below our standard. But if somebody comes in with something creative, we don't want to quash Mr. Norfleet's type sign where it's like you said, it's branding, it's placemaking, it's creative. The idea is not to limit that creativity in any way. It's to just say this type of sign, it just doesn't rise to the level that we're looking for. Beyond that, creativity, the sky could be the limit.
Okay, I think because of the lateness of the hour, I think that what we need is an example, a written example for us to look at and kick around. I think what Brian just said is probably where we're all at, but I don't know how we get there. So, and I think what we need is, this is a long process, not a long process, but it's a 6-month process. Tonight is the first step of that process. I think you've heard enough for us for you to go back and write something up and bring back to us, and then we'll tweak that and edit it as we go and we'll all be able to sleep on it. Did we get all of the big topic?
I think we did.
Conversations?
Yeah, I think we did. I think that our input was really good. I know that some of you probably want a little break before you switch into the USA discussion.
I think so.
Yeah.
Okay, so any last comments from anybody in the public on anything you've heard tonight? I'm going to skip, I'm not going to skip, right? Any last comments on this from anybody? Again, this is the first step. There's going to be another workshop, more conversations later on, right? What I took away from this is we want that step down. We want green space. We want continuity, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what we're looking to come back.
Yeah, appreciate it.
You did a wonderful job. We appreciate helping lead this conversation.
Yeah. I love it. Somebody said, we all get places by our phones, and I think we get to answers. Foxglove is the source of digitalis, the heart medication, and
What
I can.
is that?
That's a foxglove right there. It is a trumpet-shaped sort of plant, but it is the source of digitalis for heart treatment. I see Commissioner Farnsworth nodding his head, knowing that from medical background.
He's just a genius.
And the neighborhood is certainly much better called foxglove than it is heart medicine. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you all for
Thank you.
And we'll be back.
We appreciate that.
Yeah.
Since it is late, I'm going to give us a bio break, but we'll just do 3 minutes. When we come back, it's going to be interactive, okay? So we might move some of the chairs around. We're going to move the tables out. We're going to spread these around, and I'll give you a real brief overview, and then we're going to dive right into it. So 3 minutes. There's restrooms right out there. If you just want to get up and stretch your legs, go right ahead. All right, ladies and gentlemen, if we could come back together real quickly. We want to get through this tonight. Mr. Turner, if you could, Larry. Hey, Larry. Hey, if we could come back together real quick. If you don't want to stay for the USA, I'd ask you to move your conversations out into the lobby or outside for us. We've got some bottles of water over here that are for the public. Please help yourself. I want to just give you a real brief overview. Dallas and Brian, if you could. I want to give a real brief overview for the folks watching at home about what an urban service area is and why this conversation is important to have. An urban services area, these big maps that we have, it's a big wide circle, okay? And we are saying to people like Mr. Long over here, who's sitting on our P&Z, we are saying to him, the commission is saying to him, if you are inside that circle, we are open to development, right? We foresee getting water, sewer. So that urban services line is not just a line on a map. It's an ideological line saying we see growth happening inside this. We do not see growth happening outside. So what we have here are these great big maps so that we can look at it. We can see parcel lines. Hopefully we can see where houses and roads are. We've put markers out for you, and we encourage you to sit there and redraw on these maps what you think the urban services area is. Right now, if your land is not inside that urban services area, then we have only one commercial zoning package for you. So when people say, well, I saw somebody bought land outside the urban service area, they're going to put a neighborhood. No, they're not, because it's not inside the urban services area. So if it's inside, it's developable. If it's outside, it's really not developable in any mass way, okay? So we've got 3 stations around here, okay? And I see my staff wants to make a comment. We've got 3 stations. Every station should have multiple maps. If you think you've marked up a map to where you'd like to pitch it, maybe pull that one off, roll it up. We'll set that aside so that you can say, this is how I see it growing. This is how I see it happening. I want to say, and this is important, I think Tripp's going to want to hear this, but if there's a code on the map, there's a key code on the map, that's an important key code to look at. If land already has entitlements, if it's already active, then I would argue that it's not right, it's not just for us to try to draw the urban services area in a shape that takes those entitlements away from it, okay? So the key is really important. You'll see red, blue, yellow, right? Take a look at that. I think we have some maps that don't have that key because the key kind of blocks up some of the area as well. And I think that is everything I needed to say in summary. Did I miss anything, Brian or Mike? Did it say anything that if I didn't miss it, I'd say let's skip it and just let folks get up and move around and point out some things. If there's a slide in there that covers something that I didn't, put that one up and let's.
I think it'd be valuable for the people who aren't familiar with what a USA is to hear it. And
We'll do it.
I'll be very quick. So again, just to recap, what the urban services area is, it was established by the legislature. It's what the city uses as a tool, as the mayor said, to limit where growth, dense growth can occur. It's more of a blunt tool, kind of, so to speak, than it is like land use and zoning, which is more precise. Okay, so the current urban services area is approximately a 3-mile radius, about 28 square miles. It covers all the downtown area. To give some context, that's what the previous 2007 urban services area looked like, is the area in red up there. And you can see it's surrounded by the current one. This is just kind of another edition of that map, and it shows you that where the developments that we currently have, either entitled or under review, fall within the urban services area. And so your options, you leave the urban service area exactly as it is. You leave it as it is, but you change it. Now, that was one of the items, was the current urban services area, some of the lines bisect parcels, and the question was, well, if it bisects the parcel, is all of the parcel in, is part of the parcel in, is none of the parcel in? And so you change it just to define that, clarify that, or you amend it substantially and you redraw all the lines. And so leaving it as it is, to leave it as it is, but to change, define what's included versus not included when it's bisected would be a text amendment to the comp plan. And then changing it, here's the current one, but if you wanted to change it, and this is just staff's quick and dirty kind of, this is what it could kind of look like, but it's not a recommendation, you could do something like that, where you follow the transportation corridors, or you surround areas that you believe are going to have growth in the next 5, 10, 15 years.
And actually, Brian, go back to that slide, because that kind of shape is exactly what we'd like you guys to generate. Please don't be manipulated by that shape. That's an example of what we're asking you to do on the map, right? Go ahead.
And so if you want to amend it, it's amended by ordinance, so it's heard first by the Planning and Zoning Board, then 2 hearings by the City Commission. After the first hearing, if it's adopted by the City Commission, goes to Department of Economic Opportunity for their review on the comp plan amendment, and assuming no comment from DEO, then it comes back for the second reading and can be enacted by the City Commission.
Takes about 4 months.
Okay, so on this table right here, I've doodled on that map. That's sort of my suggestion. Really, I want to harp on this one point. If you are outside the urban services area and a distribution center came in or something like that and said, well, I need a big 300-acre swath of land, and we cut a big swath of land out, there is no zoning package for that distribution center to then be built, okay? I know that we've had a lot of folks talking about the rate of houses and those kinds of things, but the urban service area is not just a residential growth tool, it's a commercial growth tool as well. So if you drastically shrink it, then we wouldn't be able to, have an industrial park or something like that also. So we need to keep those thoughts in mind. So with that, I really want this to be interactive. So everybody grab a marker, stand up. You can talk amongst each other, grab a commissioner, talk to them. Let's hash it out. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, why don't you wrap up the conversations that you're in now? And let's see if we can't begin to come back together again. All right, man. Have a good night. All right. So I hope everybody had a chance to discuss the urban service area. We'll wait for Commissioner Farnsworth to make his way back up here to the dais. You've always wanted to do that, haven't you? Come on, Monty. Come on back. Okay, so I hope everybody had a chance to have a conversation about the urban service area. We have a much better understanding of what it is, the different shapes that it could be, the pros and cons. Our goal now, our staff is going to collect everything that everybody has drawn. We're going to sort of overlay them on top, look for commonalities about what everybody is thinking, and then we will come back to this conversation again. This is not the end of this. This is the beginning of this conversation. So I want to say thank you guys, especially everybody who made it here till the end. I know it's kind of a long night. So I want to open it up to comments. And I'm going to ask the manager, do you have any comments to end the evening? Don't feel like you have to.
Just, Mr. Mayor, one thing that I think it's huge to announce is that we are the recipient of the Finance Officers Association.
Highest Finance Association in Transparency and Accounting for the third year in a row, ladies and gentlemen. Third year in a row. Great job, Dallas. Will you, since it's there, will you and Dallas, will y'all pull this podium out so that the public can get up here and make any comments here? Madam Clerk, did you have any comments?
Yes, I do. Thank you. If anyone is interested in becoming a candidate in our 2022 municipal election, please call me or come by the office and make an appointment so that we can go over the paperwork or answer any questions that you may have. And that would be all.
Can you believe it? It's already election time again. Okay, Commissioner Mazon, you got any comments?
You gonna start with me? I would just like to thank every Newberryan that came in tonight, any resident, because any input is good input. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Farnsworth?
Yeah, I'd agree with Commissioner Mazon. It's nice to have a house full of people to bounce things off of and listen and get their opinion.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Martin?
Same.
Thank you. Commissioner Clark?
Thank y'all, and same.
Commissioner Coleman?
I got 2 songs I want to sing. You all right with that, right?
No, absolutely not.
Okay, I have nothing.
All right, thank you, sir. I want to let folks know before we open up public comment, because I would like anyone to come up and tell us what you were thinking, what you were asking. Before we do that, though, please note that our next regularly scheduled commission meeting fell on Valentine's Day, so we shifted that to Tuesday, February 15th, so that everybody can spend time with their loved ones on that day. I also want to invite you March 3rd. It's going to be the State of the City speech, State of the City event, and the Taste of Newberry. I believe the municipal building will be open. All the renovations will be done. That's, again, March 3rd at 6:30? 6:30? I think it's 6:30 start time. March 8th, we have a special evening to honor our very first and only female mayor in the city of Newberry, Mentha Lee Norfleet. That's March 8th. I think that event starts at 7. It will also happen in the municipal building. March 8th is International Women's Day, so we're going in the city of Newberry to honor our first female mayor on International Women's Day. That concludes my comments, and anybody from the public, anything that you talked about, would you like to share it with the commission, especially if you didn't get a chance to talk to the commissioners?
I think Megan should start.
I said my piece.
Okay.
We talked to you and that was.
All right. Okay. Are you sure? You stayed here till 10:30? Speak now. We are, is it 9:30?
9:30.
Wow.
9:30. Well, hang on now, let's keep on talking.